This is homage to the mother of all the Buddhas, the perfection of wisdom, mother. Bodhi Swaha, Dayatha Bhagati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha, Dayatha Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha. Again, homage to the mother of the Buddhas, the Sharvakas, Vatyaka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Alamkara by Maitreya. And this is a verses of salutation from Nagarjuna's Mulla Madhyamaka Karika. Tambatela Chatselo.
I think now I speak Tibetan. I think beginning, since the Buddha's teaching, as I mentioned yesterday, see the change through one's own effort, not sort of relying on Buddha's blessing. So Buddha himself stated,
the Buddha stated that the Buddhas do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, and they do not take away the suffering of sentient beings, and they do not transpose their own realizations into others, but only by teaching the truth they help sentient beings. And so this is the meaning of the verse, that the Buddhas cannot wash away the sins of sentient beings. These sins and the negative emotions cannot be washed away by water, and then the sufferings cannot be taken away by the Buddhas, and the Buddha cannot actually give us as gifts their own realizations for us sentient beings who do not want suffering but want happiness. But how do the Buddhas help sentient beings is, so what is path, the right path, and not the wrong path, and what is right and wrong? The Buddha himself actually cultivated the paths within himself, and then from his own experience he has showed us the truth. And therefore the disciples of the Buddha, the followers of the Buddha, first hears about this truth that the Buddha has attained, and then they should reflect on the meaning and then meditate on it. And through this way, the sentient beings, the followers, should overcome the causes of suffering and attain the freedom from suffering. So what is the truth that we are talking about, what the Buddha has taught? In the sutra, it is said, the empty nature, the peaceful, and the unborn nature, because of not knowing these, the sentient beings are caught up in the samsara. And therefore the Buddha, through multitudes of reasonings, has actually revealed this. And so with regard to suffering, there are three types of suffering, which comes through unmeritorious deeds, which are like harming other sentient beings. And so as a result of which we have suffering, we experience suffering. And so in order to get rid of, overcome this, we need to avoid these non-meritorious karmas. And so these non-meritorious karmas also come from the causes. So from bad, negative causes, there's a negative consequence, and those positive causes give rise to positive effects. And therefore, the harmful actions, the actions which harm others, bring about suffering as their consequence. And the positive, wholesome actions bring about happiness. So if you think, by thinking that creating the cause which is actually negative, if one thinks that this will bring about happiness, this is wrong. And so because of our ignorance about the law of causality, we do this kind of thing. And therefore, this kind of ignorance about the law of causality is rooted in the ignorance about the reality of things, the suchness of things. And therefore, to overcome this ignorance about law of causality, which is rooted in the ignorance about the reality of things. And therefore, by overcoming these two, we need to overcome suffering. And then the second type of suffering is the changeable suffering. And so we usually consider these kind of experiences as being happiness. So the contaminated experiences which we consider as happiness or joyful, blissful, are actually in the nature of changeable suffering. And so, since they come about through causes and conditions which are negative, they are going to be overcome in the end. And so they are not a true happiness or blissful experience. And so they are called changeable suffering. So of course, these kind of the second type of suffering comes from meritorious karmas, which we consider wholesome actions, wholesome karma. Usually, of course. So, due to ignorance about reality of things, even if we may create such positive karmas, but the result of them is the changeable suffering. And therefore, ultimately, they are to be overcome and gotten rid of. So the suffering of suffering and changeable suffering, they are contingent upon the five aggregates which come about through our negative emotions and karma. And so this kind of aggregate, which is under the influence of karma and delusions, ultimately is in the nature of suffering. And therefore, because they are rooted in ignorance about the reality of things, and with regard to identification of this ignorance, the four philosophical schools within Buddhism, there are slight differences amongst them in terms of identifying it. Now here, since we are, the teaching that we are dealing with is the teaching on Prajnaparamita, therefore we have to explain this ignorance from the point of view of the Madhyamakas. So the ignorance about this reality, first we need to know the ignorance. So this ignorance is that which diametrically is opposed to reality, knowing reality. So it is not just that we are ignorant about something which is not true, but something which is opposite to truth. So when we talk about falsity, false, it is something which is against or which is opposite of truth. And therefore, the ignorance that we are talking about, this avidya, is that which is in opposition to the knowledge. And so, what the reality is, we need to understand it. How things are, And so, since ignorance actually focuses on something which is opposite which is opposite of what reality is, therefore we need to know what that reality is. And ignorance, according to the Asanga and his followers, is the mere not knowing about the reality, the mere ignorance. Whereas in the case of Nagarjuna and his followers, this ignorance is that which actually is opposed to true knowledge. And so, since three things come about through causes and conditions, the ignorance sees that things are independent. And so in a sutra it said that clinging to or perceiving or conceiving things to have some perfect or absolute existence, things that do come through causes and conditions, is ignorance. And that is what the Buddhas have said to be, the Buddha has taught to be ignorance. And so from this ignorance comes the rest of the chains of the 12 links of dependent origination. And so this ignorance in the 12 links, the first link in the 12 links is the ignorance about the true reality of things, how things exist. And so we need to know what the actual reality is, not just be satisfied with the appearance of things.
I can express this through my broken English. There is always gap, appearances and reality. So all external things as well as our internal experiences, all you see appears. It's something exists by itself. It never appears us as a sort of mere sort of designated thing. Things appear, something independently exists. That's appearances. If these experiences are true, the reality is it that sort of independent exists there, then we must investigate. More investigation, that reality should be more clearer. So when we investigate, yesterday also I mentioned like quantum physics. The scientists, those physicists, quantum physicists, they already know things appears as objectively exist. But if we investigate, we can't find. So yesterday I mentioned, scientists, quantum physicists, they live in sort of dilemma. Now what is the reality? We can't find. It appears objectively exist. But if we investigate, nothing objectively exists. So the reality is, nothing exists by objectively. Appearances, everything exists from their own side. So this is gap. Now, deeper level of ignorance is, based on appearances. So we, certain mind, consider, things independently exist. Now what is wrong? There's mere delusion or something serious delusion. I think your, now, for example, I have, now, for example, you see, I have certain sort of ignorance, what in your pocket, I do not know. So that also kind of ignorance. You see, you also, you see, do not know what my pocket. Or I think more serious, in my bag, what is there? You see, you have ignorance. So that also kind of ignorance. Such ignorance, not serious, doesn't matter. Now, why you see, this ignorance is something serious is that deeper level of ignorance is actually acting basis of all our mental projection. We very much sort of emphasis, anything, you see, there exists by objectively. So that's absolute, that's truth. So things appears something nice, then since you consider these something absolutely, objectively exist, or say independent, then you feel attachment. When things appear something negative, again from objective, so the negative there. So then you develop anger, hatred, all these things. So that briefly I already mentioned yesterday also. So now that is the reason. That kind of fundamental level of that ignorance, that causing all distorted concept. So all distorted sort of concept among them, most of destructive emotion are based on distorted ignorance. So here, Tibetan word, or the chādāṅga.
So all our attachment and anger, these negative emotions, what appears is that things appear to have some kind of true existence, and then we cling on to such a true existence, and so this serves as a basis for distorted views and conceptions.
The one American scientist, Aaron Beck, also mentioned, when we develop anger, the 90% of negativeness of the object is actually mental exaggeration, mental project. So therefore, that kind of ignorance is not just mere ignorance or something not importance of ignorance. No. That ignorance is really very, very serious. In order to deal with all destructive emotion, ultimately we must deal with that ignorance. So,
So as I said, as I quoted, the sentient beings wander in the samsara by being ignorant about the nature of things being empty and so forth. And so this kind of ignorance is the source of all suffering. And therefore, in order to get rid of this ignorance, the Buddha used multiple methods and many different logics and reasonings in order to lead us out of this condition. And so, what are the methods here referred to? So for beginners, the Buddha showed a selflessness of selflessness, which refers to the selflessness of substantially existent person. So this is, and then within the innate kind of clinging to self, we have a notion of some kind of a governing factor which rules over our psychophysical aggregates. So when we think about my mind or my body, we think and we also say this. And so, of course, there is a mind, or your mind and your body. But when you think my body and my mind, there is a notion or perception as if there is this self which rules over your body and the mind. And so a self which is separate from the body and the mind. So, of course, since our birth, we can think about ourselves. I am when I was young, when I was... And then you can also think about yourself as an old person or a sick person and so forth. And so on the basis of change in the body and the mind, we think about aging, sickness, and these changes going on in us. But when we think about this I, yourself, then you have this notion that this has been there right from the beginning, since your birth. And so, therefore, there are certain philosophical schools develop the idea that there should be such an I, an I or self, which got rules over or is separate from the body and the mind. Of course, within the body and the mind, there are the gross and the subtle levels. And so, body and the mind have gross, subtle, and the very subtle. And so when it comes to the subtlemost body and mind, of course, there's no beginning nor end to them. And so with regard to the gross body and the mind, of course, at each birth, we start with a gross body and gross mind. But when within the subtlest, the subtlemost mind and body, there is no beginning and mind, beginning and end. And so energy, or the wind energy, the prana energy, is that energy which is has motility, movement, and so which goes together with the subtle mind, the clear light mind. And so we have this innate notion that the I has been there since, all the time. Whereas the body and the mind kind of changes over time. And so, therefore, the certain philosophical schools came up with this idea that there is a self which is separate from the body and the mind. And this is not something that is innate in us, but it is philosophically concocted. And then with regard to clinging to some kind of autonomous, self-sufficiently, substantially existent I, there are two types. One which sees such an I, which has some characteristics which are as the body and the mind, and there is another one which sees that such a self does not have any characteristics of the body and the mind. So all the philosophical schools of Buddhism asserts or explains this. And then in the Chittamatra view, they talk about non-duality of subject and object. And according to this view, the conception of the object and subject being, dual, is the clinging to some kind of a selfhood in things. Whereas in the Madhyamaka view, there is this assertion where things are seen to have some kind of objective existence, but then they're also imputed by our conceptions. And so together, the objective existence and then the perceptual kind of designation give identification to things. And so when things do not exist in that way, then that kind of clinging to such a way of existence of things is said to be the self, clinging to self. And then the subtlest idea of the self-hood is what is taught by Nagarjuna and his disciples, such as Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, and Chandrakirti, and Shantideva. So they assert or make the point that things do not have any objective existence, even in conventional terms. And so even in convention, there is no objective existence in things. So as I said yesterday, yogis do not find things to exist in any way when they do analysis through the sevenfold analysis. And so even in the ultimate sense or in the world, in terms of the world, things do not have any objective existence, is what Chandrakirti says. And so the shape of a person and then the collection or the assemblage of the aggregates are not the person. And so when you take apart and break down the aggregates, then you will not be able to find anything being the person within the aggregates. And so in epistemology and logic, we learn about the certain reasonings which are called reasoning of the negation. So if the person were to be within the aggregates, and you should be able to find the person when you actually break down the aggregates into the 5 aggregates and to look within the mind and so forth, but it is not there. And so this is one kind of logic. And then if the person, the self, were to be there as a governor or a ruler of the aggregates, we should also be able to find it. But this cannot be, we cannot find the self. Now, the critical point is the mind or consciousness. So within the mind or consciousness, there are various degrees of subtlety, the gross levels of mind, and then the subtle and the subtlemost and so forth. And so nothing whatsoever, none of these states of mind cannot be asserted as a person. And so in the Vaibhashikas and the Vaibhashikas assert some kind of indivisible particles or indivisible mind and so forth in moments, terms of moments. But then the Madhyamakas do not assert such thing.
Past, present, future. See, no disagreement, you see, the existing of 3 times, past, present, future. However, if we investigate what is present, you see, mere designation, on the level of just mere designation, we can say past century, present century, future century. That means 100 years. Within present century, we can say past decade, future decade. If present century is absolute, then we can't We can't find the past decade of present century. Difficult. All designated. It worked. Now present decade further goes present year, last year, next year. The present year, month, 12th month, past month, coming month. So, the month, past week, coming week. Week, yesterday, tomorrow, and today, morning, afternoon, morning, already, now, already passed. So afternoon, not yet come. Present, noon, hour. Hour, minute by minute. Still we can say past hour, coming hour, present hour. Present hour, further sort of reductions way. Reductions way.
Divide into.
Then, you see, present hour, minute, second. Go that way, we can't find present. 1 second, up to 1 second, past. 1 second, future. Where is present? We can't find. So that way, investigate what is present mind. Difficult. So therefore, anything which momentarily changing, and also you see like space or sky or these things also, you see, merely designated like that. So therefore, we can't find objectively. So it is, now is it through that way, through that kind of investigation, you can't say, my mind is self. No. Even it's our common experience also, we rightly say, my mind. Today, my mind, very happy. Or today, my mind, very bad mood. So still, I is the owner. Mind is the something possession, like that. So therefore, so investigate where is I? You can't find. If you deny existing of I, that's of course, if there's no I, then no other. No self, no other. Then no basis of practice of altruism, practice of compassion, or forgiveness. So naturally, there is I, there is self. But then there's no alternative. Either, existence, I is there, self is there. But then only two alternatives. That self either exists independently, objectively, or it is existence due to designation. So if objectively exists, if we investigate, we must find. No. It worked, so must be exist. But impossible to exist by independently. So then the things are relative. Even Buddha, we can't find Buddha. Beside Buddha's body, Buddha's speech, Buddha's mind, we can't find. Buddha's mind also, you see, past, present, future, we can't find. So all phenomena, now as the Heart Sutra mentioned, all phenomena are empty. It means not nothingness, but absence of independent existence. Clear? So that way, investigate, even conventional level, we can't find. So once we, through investigation, if we investigate, then
So in the perspective of that mind, which searches for the thing which is designated, then everything just gets deconstructed. So when we think about a form, of course, it is accepted without doing any kind of ultimate analysis. But then when you actually search for the form within that object, you will not be able to find anything being the form. But then, to us, this form appears to have some kind of absolute or independent existence. And therefore, in the Madhyamaka text, it is said that except the mind which is totally absorbed in absorbed in emptiness, and all the rest of the states of mind in sentient beings are mistaken in terms of the appearance, what appears to it. But then that doesn't mean that we cannot posit what is valid cognition. We do make the difference between valid cognition and invalid cognition and so forth, and therefore clinging to this or grasping as some true existence is a totally invalid cognition. And therefore, it is when we talk about valid cognition, according to the Madhyamaka philosophy, that cognition, or which is not mistaken in relation to its main object, is said to be that it is not mistaken with the main object. Is therefore it is a valid cognition. But then that valid cognition is something which is mistaken with regard to what appears to it. And so, for ordinary beings like us, all our perceptions are, in a way, we can say, mistaken. From that point of view,
appears from objectivity. That's a mistake. That's wrong view.
So when through the sevenfold analysis, nothing can be found by the yogi. And so even in conventional terms, nothing can be found to have any objective existence. But that doesn't mean that things do not exist at all. But things do have their own functions. But then, despite that, when you actually search for the thing, the way it appears to us, and then we cannot find it. And therefore, things are merely designated, merely nominally designated. And therefore, when you understand this, then this actually helps to understand that the things are. We do not have any basis for exaggerating and designated things through these distorted views. And therefore, Nagarjuna says the karma and delusions come from distorted views. And so, in the 70 verses of reasoning, Nagarjuna says that as long as there remains some kind of objectification or objectified nature of things, there is going to be destructive emotions. And therefore, what we need to do is to overcome, to deconstruct everything, to destroy any kind of objectification whatsoever. So things, of course, do exist merely in terms of how in terms of appearance, and on the basis of that appearance we designate things, and only in that way things exist, and not in other ways. And so whatever is dependently designated, whatever arises through dependence is said to be empty, and therefore, it is that which is designated, and therefore it is the middle way, as we talked yesterday. And so the reality of interdependent nature of things is the basis level or of the middle way. And then the path or the realization of emptiness, that nature of dependent nature of things is the emptiness, the middle path. And then perhaps when you have overcome all the duality, whereby you are absorbed in emptiness, then maybe that can be said to be the resultant middle way. And so the Buddha actually led his disciples from the very gross understanding, very coarse understanding of selflessness, and then led them on to the subtlest understanding of emptiness. And therefore, there are various different reasonings that are used to prove emptiness, such as reasoning, which analyzes the causality of things and analyzes the results of things and so forth. And therefore, the Buddha is said to have led sentient beings through various, called hundreds of means into this understanding of the reality of things.
About shunyata is something very relevant in order to tackle destructive emotion such as anger, attachment, jealousy, all these frustration, all these very much related with that. So, in order to understand about Buddha Dharma, this is something very, very important. Some people, even the Tibetan, some scholars also say, and many sort of the teaching, actually, you see, this sort of subject come very, very much later, not at the beginning. I think there are two ways to introduce Buddha Dharma. One, all major texts wrote by Nalanda masters, all, you see, at the beginning, again Tibetan, Gososhishis.
They mention the four topics, the subject matter, and then the purpose, and then the ultimate purpose, and then the relationship between these three. And so, for someone who is of sharp faculty, he or she does not accept things, right? Just by hearing that some literature or some text says this and that. And so this is actually just accepting the things easily without doing any analysis is the way of someone who who's dealt with it. And so the sharp-witted ones actually check what is the subject matter of this text and what is the purpose of teaching such, and then what is the goal of such teachings. And so the long-term, lasting goal and benefit, they check what these are. And so the third one is related to the second, and then that in turn is related to the first one, the subject matter. And therefore, in this way, when they do analysis or investigation into things, then they begin to take interest in the study. And so with regard to the teaching, the Buddha has taught the four reliances, relying not on the person but the teaching, relying not just on the words but the meaning, and not relying only on the provisional meaning, but the ultimate, the definitive meaning. And then within that, not just leaving or at the intellectual, superficial understanding, but then the wisdom understanding of things. And therefore, a Buddhist follower of a Buddha should be someone who is of sharp faculty. And so for them, it is very important to use reasoning to come to some conclusion. And Aryadeva says in the 400 verses, one who doubts about the teaching of the teaching of the Buddha, particularly those which are obscure to them, they should be led into understanding of the Buddha by making them understand about emptiness. And then Dharmakirti in his Pramana Vartika says, because the Buddha is not deceptive or not in terms of the main teaching that he gives, and therefore we can infer the rest from there. And so the ultimate goal of the Buddha's teaching is to lead us to ultimate nirvana or liberation. So we need to check whether the teaching of the Buddha is false in terms of his main purpose of the teaching, which is to lead us to the highest goal, or not. And so once you understand that he is not fallible, that the Buddha is infallible in terms of teaching the path or the means leading to that highest goal of enlightenment, then you can infer from there that he cannot be deceptive or he cannot be fallible in terms of teaching, giving teachings on the methods leading to higher rebirths as well. And so, whether you are a believer or non-believer, it doesn't matter. If you actually learn about emptiness, it really makes sense. It can be used as an academic subject. And then there is another quotation from the 400 verses by Aryadeva, who says that just as the physical faculty pervades the whole of the body, all the other sense faculties, likewise ignorance permeates all the rest of the negative emotions. And therefore, because the ignorance which holds on to some kind of a true existence in things, is the root of all the rest of the negative emotions. Therefore, one needs to know this ignorance first and then tackle it by understanding the opposite of what it actually clings to. And so, through this, one has to understand how about the possibility of enlightenment, without which we cannot have the aspiration to enlightenment as such, through reason. And so, a Tibetan scholar once had said that we have to know that we have to know the sacredness of the Buddha by using reasoning. Otherwise, you would be asked, who actually knows that the Buddha is sacred? And you would say, oh, Master Nagarjuna actually knew that. And if you ask further, who knew Master Nagarjuna was infallible? And then you would have to say, my teacher says so. And then how do you know that your master is infallible? And you would have to say, I know him. And so you cannot just resort to some saying of somebody else as such, just to make this kind of claim. But you have to use reasoning. And then I usually tell this story as well. In Kham region of Tibet, there was a monastery, an abbot of a monastery, and then somebody came to see the abbot one day, and he reached the monastery and told that he wants to see the abbot. And then the attendant of the abbot said the abbot was not there. And then the visitor asked where the abbot had been. And then the attendant said, maybe he had a big mouth, but maybe partly he was true. And he said that the abbot had actually gone to scare the elderly people in the town. So this has to do with frightening people about not doing or committing negative actions, because they would go to hell because of them. And so it's if you the way we give teachings is not to scare people, but by actually introducing what nirvana means, and that it is a possibility, and particularly it is a possibility for us as individuals. And so the Buddha Dharma is not about scaring people by giving this kind of teaching about hell realm and going to hell realm and so forth. So I feel that what this attendant had actually said to the visitor was is actually a big instruction, a spiritual instruction for me. And so we need to study the classic texts written by these great masters of India, such as Nagarjuna and so forth. And in Tibet, of course, the Tibetan masters have given teachings in accordance with, the specific disciples for their purpose. But the pillar of the teaching of the Buddha should be the writings of the 17 Nalanda masters. And so these teachings, the specific teachings given by Tibetan masters may not be considered as the pillar. But I do not, although I do not know much, but I just wish to say.
Introduction about Buddhism, particularly Nalanda tradition. So therefore, you see, Nalanda tradition is very much sort of like academic subject. Investigate, a lot of investigation, and raise all doubts, questions. Even Buddha's own word, raise question, and then investigate. So therefore, I usually see telling people, Buddhists, firstly, we should be 21st century Buddhist. Because Buddhist way of approach is use our intelligence maximum way, through that way, transform our emotion. So in order to carry, the investigation, the utilization of our intelligence maximum way, we need knowledge. All these masters the way their presentation and so
in our traditional texts, we come across these 3 points. First, giving the position of others, and then establishing one's own position, and then refuting any kind of criticism of one's position.
Tibetan Lamas in Tibet, and those texts wrote by Indian masters in India, there's differences. Because the circumstances in Tibet, I think over 99% are Buddhist. They simply, believe that. So not much sort of necessary to argue or to use a lot of reasons. Whereas in India, very strong non-Buddhist scholars or masters. So through centuries, a lot of debate or argument. And also within Buddhist, again, debate. Therefore, their writing always emphasis on reasons. The Buddhists, the explanation about Buddha Dharma, mainly through reasoning. Whereas in the Tibetan case, explanation about Buddha Dharma, mainly is based on faith. So that now time much changed. So therefore, we must go to original Nalanda master's way of teaching. That's very, very important. So now, the difficult text now. Read. So those people, even those old people like me, who have some interest about Buddha Dharma, now you should take some kind of rebirth, should be young student, carry, study. So usually you see young people supposed to see carry study. The old people, lot of experience, now relax and guide to other people. I think worst case, how to cheat other people, how to bully other people. So we, those people who have some sort of interest about Buddhism, Buddha Dharma, please pay more sort of attention, study. It's very, very important. I am now old person, but still, whenever I have time, I always read, think, study. In 13th century, one great Tibetan masters, scholars, and great logician, he expressed, person who even dying tomorrow, it is still worthwhile today study. Because some impact, knowledge which gain from today's sort of study, some impact will come next life. So even you see sick person in hospital, nearly dying, still worthwhile study, thinking. Very important. So now, for study is concerned, I think Tibetan language is now it becomes very clear, best language to explain thoroughly about Nalanda tradition. So I think that the translation, Tibetan translation, I think very, very precise, very good. Many scholars, when they find some difficult to understand in Sanskrit, they usually use check, prefer, or check a Tibetan translation. They found very precise sort of meaning like that. So therefore, of course nowadays there's a translation from Tibetan to English, more and more now books coming, and also in the translation now in Russian language, or Latvians. The translation, very, very important. Like that. So. Firstly, let me I wish vodka. Maybe good. At the beginning, a little bit sort of, I think, refresh or alert. Then eventually, become mad. Okay. So now, the Heart Sutra, now the Shirabji Yandensla, similar Tibetan amazing Taba Meadows, Chinjilole, Shindu Nori.
So the qualities or the excellences of wisdom, which is shown by having no obscuration in their minds and they have no fear. And so the negative emotions are those which actually disturb the peace of mind. In one who has the peace of his or her peace of mind is destroyed. So in order for us to have this aspiration to go out of samsara, we need to know the negativeness of the negative emotions and need to overcome it. And this is one of the obscurations or the defilements. And then the second defilement is the defilement of or obscuration to knowledge. So with one's instance of mind, being able to know everything as it is, the obstacle to that is this obscuration to knowledge. And so in certain texts we find mention of perceiving the two truths to be of different nature. So during one's absorption, meditative absorption in emptiness, you are not able to see the conventionalities. And when you are actually out of that absorption, you are not able to stay absorbed in emptiness single-pointedly. And so these two cannot go together because of this obscuration to knowledge. And therefore, in order to know the varieties of mental dispositions of sentient beings, that knowledge is actually obstructed by this obscuration to knowledge. And so with regard to obscuration to knowledge or this cognitive obscuration, it is identified differently in the different philosophical schools. Within Madhyamaka also, the Bhaviveka's assertion is different from other Madhyamakas. So mainly in the auto commentary of Chandrakirti's Mula Madhyamaka Avatara, so the actual antidote to this is the obscuration knowledge is the direct perception of emptiness. So this must be complemented or supported by the bodhicitta. Why? Because when you meditate on emptiness, in order to overcome just the destructive emotions alone, you are not needed to meditate or cultivate bodhicitta. But when you meditate or cultivate the wisdom of realizing emptiness, in order to overcome this obscuration to knowledge, the cognitive obscuration, then you need bodhicitta in order for that wisdom understanding emptiness to fulfill your purpose completely. And so the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddha Arahats, of course, have overcome the negative emotions, but not the obscuration to knowledge. And then the Bodhisattvas, from the first through to the seventh level, have not overcome this obscuration to knowledge as well. And therefore, the Bodhisattvas need to put effort in overcoming the obscuration to knowledge from the eighth through to the 10th Bodhisattva ground. And so these three grounds, 8th, 9th, and 10th, are known as the pure grounds because they are purified of the destructive or afflictive emotions. So when you actually assert that the obscuration of knowledge is that imprint left by the clinging to true existence and things, and in order to overcome this imprint, you need to overcome the negative emotions themselves first. So in order to first, for example, if some object or some container is has some bad smell in it, in order to get rid of that smell, you need first to take away the thing in it that gives this foul smell, and then after taking the material out, then you need to wash it further in order to clean it or clear it of this kind of foul smell. And so, to overcome both the destructive emotions as well as this cognitive obscuration, the actual antidote is the meditation on emptiness, the realization of emptiness, the wisdom of emptiness, and supported by the bodhicitta and the six perfections. Then that understanding of emptiness is said to be the understanding of emptiness which has all the sublime sublime aspects to it. And so, cultivation of bodhicitta, supporting the understanding of emptiness, helps in overcoming this obscuration to knowledge as well. Therefore, it is said, having no obscuration in their minds and having no fear. So by meditating on such an emptiness with full aspect, or to fulfill the full aspiration or goal, I mean, one will not have fear or obscuration to the mind, whereas and otherwise one would have. And by going utterly beyond error, they will reach the end of nirvana. And so, to reach nirvana, one has to cultivate the wisdom of emptiness. And so the Buddha in the first sermon has said that this is the suffering, this is noble truth of suffering, this is the noble truth of the origin and cessation and path. And so this, by meditating on emptiness, one reaches the what is known as true cessation. And so true cessation from the path of beginning with the path of seeing through to when one overcomes all negative emotions and all the defilements from one's mind. And then it goes on to say all the Buddhas too who abide. So the cultivation of wisdom of emptiness, the ultimate goal of this is to reach Buddhahood. So all the Buddhas too who abide in the three times attain the full awakening of unexcelled perfect enlightenment by relying on this perfection of wisdom. So no sooner one overcomes this the obscuration to knowledge, one becomes a Buddha. And so there is this term, there are certain terms used like a great being and so forth. And so the past Buddhas have become enlightened through this path, and then those who are becoming a Buddha now also reach that enlightenment through this path, the perfection of wisdom, and the future Buddhas also will reach that goal through this perfection of wisdom. And then the mantra of the Heart Sutra, the wisdom, the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, one should know that the mantra of the perfection of wisdom So if I explain roughly, briefly here, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom here means mantra has the connotation of shielding one's mind or protecting or saving the mind. So in context of Tantra, it has a meaning of protecting or shielding the mind from ordinary perception and ordinary clinging. Although during the meditative absorption in emptiness, of course, one has not reached the freedom from the negative emotions and defilements, but one will reach that. So when this antidote to the negative emotions, the defilements arises within you, although the negative emotions are not there, but you have not yet overcome it. And so this knowledge of the true or the reality of things is called the mantra of the great knowledge, and then the unexalted mantra. And since it leads to this wisdom leads to the highest goal, and it is the mantra equal to the unequaled. So the sentient beings and Buddhas are unequal, but then the sentient beings finally can become a fully enlightened being. Therefore, this is the mantra equal to the unequaled. And then the mantra that quells all suffering by knowing the ultimate reality. We talk about the two truths. There is the conventional truth, which is to say that finding things without doing any kind of analysis, and then finding the ultimate reality through analytical meditation and through analysis. And therefore, Nagarjuna says the Buddhas teach the true truth, this conventional and the ultimate. And then this is also said in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara. The two truths are also taught in non-Buddhist traditions as well. For example, the Sankhya school of non-Buddhist school talks about the primal factor and the conscious being as being the ultimate truth, and the rest of the things which are like from the 25 objects or phenomena are said to be conventional truth. And so all the philosophical schools, with the Buddhist or non-Buddhist, talk about the two truths. And so on the basis of the subtlety of how they explain or interpret the ultimate truth, there is this difference in the two truths. And so it is true because it is not deceptive. So the mind, which actually sees emptiness directly, there's no disparity between appearance and the reality, because that mind, which is totally absorbed in emptiness, has no mental fabrication or so the mantra of the perfection is proclaimed, the Yathakatagat Paragat Parasam Gati Bodhi Swaha. So this is the mantra. So this mantra can be explained in relation to the fivefold path. So gate, paragate, parasamgate, and bodhi swaha. These are the five sets. So tat yatha means it is like this. So this perfection of wisdom path, by cultivating this path, as you progress along the path more profoundly and you progress to higher paths, and so it is like this. How to attain this path progressively higher and profound is like this. Tathagata usually means the one who has gone thus. So gati here has the connotation of going. And then second gati also means to go, going. And paragati means going beyond. Parasamgati means going perfectly beyond. And bodhiswaha means laying the foundation of enlightenment. And then we can, if we put this mantra in an imperative case, then we can say go beyond, go perfectly beyond, and lay the foundation of enlightenment. And so, what are these 5 paths that are referred by these 5 sets of mantras? So in the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the Buddha taught the 12 links of dependent origination in relation to the 4 noble truths. And so with regard to the he begins by teaching about ignorance leading to the karma, the formative karma, then leading to consciousness and so forth. And so this ignorance, which is the root of samsara, until you are able to overcome it completely, there's no way one can have lasting happiness. And therefore, in order when you have this wish to actually attain this nirvana, which is the freedom from this ignorance, and you can see the possibility of it, and then not only thinking about oneself alone in the context of Mahayana path, you actually think about helping other sentient beings. And so in order to be able to do that without actually being able to attain a state whereby you are able to actually help sentient beings in accordance with their own mental dispositions, there's no way you can do that without being able to overcome all the defilements that is within oneself. But the Buddha is also said to have given teachings in accordance with the dispositions of the various disciples, whereby the Buddha, without showing or teaching the ultimate nature of things, the emptiness, he leads sentient beings, these disciples, through certain method and to that goal ultimately. And so, without being able to overcome both the obscuration of afflictive emotions and obscuration of knowledge, one cannot actually see the mental dispositions of sentient beings as precisely. And then, therefore, in order to reach that goal of enlightenment, Buddhahood, one first needs to develop the path within oneself. The first one is the path of accumulation, where one has the and then one develops the path of preparation, which is that path where you have the experience of emptiness coming through your meditation. And as you develop further, when you reach the you see emptiness very clearly, and then you are able to absorb your mind in emptiness completely without any duality, and therefore that is the path of seeing, which is referred by paragati. And so once you have reached that path, you actually are able to develop the antidote to the adventitious negative emotions, and you overcome the threefold defilements that are to be overcome by this path of seeing. And therefore, one reaches the first Bodhisattva ground. And for the Shravakas, they reach the Shravaka path of seeing. And for the Bodhisattvas, then from the second Bodhisattva ground onwards, the Bodhisattvas apply themselves to overcome the defilements that are to be overcome by that path, the path of meditation. And that is referred by the Parasamgati, going perfectly beyond. And then, as they go along, progress along the path, and they reach the path of seeing at the 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds. What the Bodhisattvas do is they actually develop that insight into the path to overcome the obscuration to knowledge as well. And they reach the pure Bodhisattva grounds. And so Parasamgate also can be referred to, explained in terms, in reference to the path of meditation of the Shravakas as well. So Shariputra, the Bodhisattvas, the great beings, should train the perfect wisdom this way. Thereupon the Blessed One arose from the meditative absorption and commended the holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, great being, saying, "This is excellent, 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 O noble child. It is just so. It is just so. Should be just so. One must practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have revealed. For then even Tathagatas will rejoice," to the end of this text. And so with this, I have completed a brief explanation of the Heart Sutra. So first we'll have question and answer session. And then in the afternoon session of the teaching, we'll go through the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas.
Labdien, jūsu svētība. Gribēju jautāt jums, ko jūs sakat, kāds ir jūsu viedoklis par pareģojumiem, astroloģiju? Kā zināms, arī Dalai Lama tiek izvēlēts pēc pareģojumiem. Ko jūs sakat šajā jautājumā?
So, Your Holiness, what is your view on divinations and astrology? Because also His Holiness, Dalai Lamas actually are also kind of being chosen using these methods, no?
Astrology, I'm skeptical. Even 5th Dalai Lama, in his autobiography, you see, he mentioned he always was joking and teasing. So, you see, he mentioned the day he born, you see, according astrology, is a good day. And he mentioned all these things. Then, at the last, he mentioned that same day, a lot of dogs also born. So, he also, you see, he sort of great sort of astrologer, really great scholar, all different subjects. But he himself, a little bit sort of skeptical. So me too. And then, as a Buddhist, Buddha stayed. Things, good and bad, comes only through your own previous action, not suns and the moons and these things. Buddha stated that. So, astrology, of course, some authentic astrologer, maybe some truth, maybe, but we need thorough sort of investigation, like that. And then, I think, kasa, sirulezi kasa, sirulezi, horoscope. My horoscope mentioned my age, 25. there is serious danger. Either die or left country. So it become quite true. So like that, I don't know. Then, divination. Divination entirely depends on the person. And in order to carry some definition, you see, you need sort of a lot of preparation. And firstly, you need some experience about altruism and some experience of interdependency. That's shunyata, patitisamupanta. So while you you carry definition, thinking, meditate these things, then definition quite sort of authentic. But just you see the dice, just use dice, not very sure. So that's depend on the person who performing these things. That's my view. And also oracles. You see, you have to sort of investigate years, whether that oracle reliable or not. You need thorough investigation. Otherwise, there's Tibetan saying, "Mi wutu talati, ta wutu dekzinshe."
So when humans become desperate, they actually rely on the gods, and when gods becomes becomes desperate, they tell lies.
Zvaigznēm.
So karma is definite, so what point is to try anything? Everything has been kind of already determined.
No. Karma means action. So, for example, till last moment, already begin the result. Otherwise, you can change. For example, now, tomorrow, I'm going to Norway. So already fixed my plane way.
Schedule.
No. Number plane. Already fixed. However, still possible. Till reach plane and cross door, still possible change. Like that. So some action, some karma, previous karma, see, about certain destination, but still possible, change that. The way how to change, now for example, go to Norway, everything fixed, but some emergency things happen, some serious matter come, it can change. So similarly, some sort of karmic destination already there, but either positive or negative, more stronger karma created, then the previous karma's destination change. So ultimately, karma is our own creation. So finally, we have the sort of, ability or opportunity to change that. So everybody, limitless sort of previous lives. So a lot of karmas still not yet ripen. So ready to produce result. But you see, now for example, meditate on shunyata or meditate about altruism. Even, you see, few minutes that really make immense effect on those previous negative karmas which is ready to produce result. Clear? Because these, for example, all these negative work, negative sort of karma, carried with selfish motivation. Altruism, this concern about limitless sentient being. So the motivation, one, just a single person's interest. The altruism, limitless sentient beings, sort of, what's the because of the benefit. So therefore, the way to motivate it, big differences. And then goal also is a selfish thing, just some certain benefit to oneself. That also often is some sort of short-sighted or not much sort of serious sort of thing. Altruism, these things, you see, the final destiny, the Buddhahood. So therefore, the negative karma and the positive karma, long run, positive karma is much, much stronger, much forceful than negative karma. All negative karma motivated by ignorance. Ignorance, quite active, but actually no basis, no solid basis. Wisdom, solid basis. So there's big differences. All negative things compare positive things, long run, positive things much, much stronger, based on solid basis. Like that. Next question. Now here.
Ваше Святейшество, скажите, пожалуйста, вот почему для постижения пустоты и состояния Будды нам очень важно изучать логику и применять аналитические способности, ведь состояние Будды, оно за пределами каких-либо концепций и умопостроений. И как нам, буддистам 21 века, при таком большом количестве информации и воззрений разных школ правильно изучать, потому что ум начинает путаться, когда ты изучаешь воззрения разных школ.
So the question is, why to realize emptiness and to attain Buddhahood? Do we need to use our intellectual abilities and analytical abilities, because the Buddhahood, the state of Buddha is beyond all conceptions. And also the part of the question is that today we live in a world where we have so much information and so many schools, and how can we avoid being confused in such a world?
Study. And not relying on just, you see, I think frankly speaking, not relying on Lama's sort of word. Sometimes there's too much emphasis about Guru Yoga. Whatever Lama says, you must accept that. I think that is not a proper way about the Nalanda tradition. Investigate. Since we even investigate Buddha's own word, we should investigate your own Lama's word. You should investigate. So we must rely on reasons which show us by those great sort of, masters. One way, these are great logicians and great academicians. They always try to seek the reality. So Buddhist way is actually, particularly Nalanda tradition, is really seeking truth from fact. So study, read more books is very, very important. Clear? Yes?
Здравствуйте. Ваше Святейшество, здравствуйте. Мы из Калмыкии, делегация очень большая. Наш народ вам желает крепкого здоровья, долгих лет жизни. Позвольте нашей делегации с вами сфотографироваться.
This is not a question, this is rather a request. We came from Kalmykia. She says, we came from Kalmykia. And we wish you long life and good health. And we ask you kindly to give us the opportunity to have a group photo with you. We have a big delegation from Kalmykia here.
Okay. Next question.
Ваше Святейство, вы сегодня и вчера много говорили о том, что все нужно проверять, не следовать слепой вере, ставить эксперименты. А как тогда можно логически проверить или доказать существование низших миров, адов или высших миров, полубогов, богов?
So yesterday and today you said that everything should be tested, analyzed, not taken on blind faith. So how can we logically investigate about... Вы могли бы еще раз последнюю часть, пожалуйста, повторить? Я плохо расслышала.
Ну, низших сфер, адов, есть еще высшие сферы.
How can we logically prove that there are like hells or higher realms? What is the logical explanation?
Actually, on this planet, I think several millions of different species of mammals, including insect, these things, that we can see. That's the only reason we cannot sort of prove, not necessary to prove logic. We can see. So, there are different forms of life. Ordinary, I think the animal, they cannot see, what's the far distance. We human beings use telescope and also use a scientific, some sort of, certain sort of use certain equipment. Through that way, you see, we can know what distance from here to moon, to sun, to other galaxies. So, that is with help of external equipment, is our knowledge. Firstly, our mental, the intellectual, the intelligence, much stronger than as I mentioned yesterday. Then secondly, use these external equipment. You see, our knowledge can increase. Similarly, now meditation, increase our mind's or mental sort of ability to know. As I mentioned yesterday briefly, memory increase, then some memory about past life come. That, again, through training of mind, the ability to know things deeper, then knows future life. That's in fact, I also met some people. I think quite a number of people who remember about past life very, very sort of precisely. So we can't see the past life. But through experiment, yes, there is some indication there's existence of past life. Similarly, different form of life, through sort of deeper experience, we can see, we can notice. So that is the way to accept different form of life. Physical level also, different form of physical, which we cannot see, but exist. So that is the main, and then three realms. Because mental state, awakening mental state dominant by sensorial experiences. The result, I mean, from that kind of sort of level of mental state, karma dhatu, mainly sensorial, and some pleasure from sensorial, seeing, hearing, smelling, and taste, and the touch, including sex. These are sensory level experiences. So that we call kama dhatu. Then, through deep meditation, all the sensorial experience diminish or stop. The deeper inner experiences, that mental state, causing, reach rupa dhatu. Still form there, but mainly not use sensorial thing, but inner calmness or peace. That's rupa dhatu. Then another realm, arupa dhatu, formless, realm. Even deeper meditation, deeper mental state. So because there are different mental state, different level of mental state, so there are three realms. So that I think we can use these sort of way. I feel it is possible, but 100% I don't know. Like that. So there, on this planet, there are different form of life already there. I mean, without a certain sort of body which we cannot see, but there is indication or some sort of existence of such things there. That, through my own experience, I can say. Like that. Next question.
Ваше Святейшество, объясните, почему в современном мире нет людей, ну, таких выдающихся людей уровня Иисуса, Будды, Мухаммеда, точнее, Махавиры? Почему нет уже таких людей, которые производят духовную революцию в духовном понимании жизни?
Your Holiness, why do you think in our modern world we don't see many extraordinary persons like Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad who make like a spiritual revolution? Why don't we see them, many of them, in today's world? What do you think?
So of course, according to the Buddhist concept, you see, these great sort of masters come at a certain period. So according to Indian tradition,
there are these eras of the golden age, then era of the duality, and three attributes and so forth.
And these are the great masters come at a certain sort of period. So today's sort of period is not
not the golden age, or
so that yes, not. I think if today you see, even is a great master like Buddha come, even at that time, you see some people, you see, express Buddha Shakyamuni Buddha, big liar. So now today, Buddha come, I think many materialistic-minded people say, I think they're nonsense. So I don't know. So these are, I think main reason. Any Nimanga.
And then we have the 5 degenerations. When the 5 degenerations arrive, degeneration of lifespan, degeneration of individuals, the time, and so forth.
Next question. So if you really want to know that, and ask Jesus Christ, or one time, you see, one sort of questioner asked me, if you have opportunity to meet Jesus Christ, then what are your questions? And then I told, I would like to know the more detailed explanation about God. Like that. Thank you. Now, next question.
Здравствуйте, Ваше Святейшество. Большое спасибо за ваше учение.
Louder. Your body looks very strong. So, more stronger voice.
Спасибо. Мы слышим о том, что тибетский народ понемногу смешивается там с китайским, с другими народами за пределами Тибета. Я слышал о том, что вы изучали этот вопрос, в частности, каким образом еврейский народ через века не сохранил свой народ и вернулся на свои земли. Я хотел бы спросить в этом контексте, что вы думаете о том, что ждет тибетский народ? Есть ли какие-то положительные моменты, которые можно перенять у еврейского народа, в частности, да, и так далее? Что вы думаете вот в этой связи? Спасибо.
Your Holiness, I know that you were asking, when you were meeting with the Jewish people, you were asking them, when you were meeting with the Jewish people, you were asking them how they managed to, maintain their culture, yes. And so, in what concerns the Tibetan people, what do you think could they learn from Jewish? Because now the Tibetans are living a very difficult period.
Yes. In the beginning, when we become refugee, we often talk, we must learn the Jewish method. 1,000 years, under difficult circumstances, in different area, they kept their culture, their faith. So we should learn the Jewish secret. So then, of course, later, we very sort of close sort of contact with many Jewish, including spiritual leaders and Jewish businessmen, Jewish politicians. So they kept, their culture, their heritage in the family. I think that's very, very important. So, therefore, we also, the Tibetan refugee community, firstly, why we ask Indian government, we want to create a colony, some kind of settlement. That's the very reason. It's much easier to go, different cities or villages to seek some jobs, and then can settle. But instead of that, we ask Indian government, we want land where group Tibetan refugee community can live. So that's the way for preservation of Tibetan culture, including Tibetan language. And similarly, refugee school. Tibetan children, young people, we can approach Indian government to send some thousands Indian schools. Very easily can solve. But instead of that, we ask Indian government, we want a separate Tibetan school with modern education. So these are mainly for preservation of Tibetan culture, Tibetan language, like that. Then last question. Last question now.
Your Holiness, if everything is connected, then it's clear why we shouldn't feel negative emotions. But what about good emotions, about love? If everything is connected, do we need to love everything?
Not very clear, concern love.
If everything is connected and there is no objective things to love, then do we need to love everything? And maybe everybody, like
so,
every being.
I think yesterday I mentioned biological factor affection, love, is biased, very much oriented about others' attitude, others' action. That's biased. So the biological factor affection only towards your friend, not your enemy. Now we need use our intelligence and use more holistic sort of thinking or wider perspective. We need affection or compassion towards all sentient being and of course all human being. So that's unbiased, not oriented about others' attitude, but people themselves. So love oneself, not the reason I very much kind towards me. No. Simply, I want happy life. I have right to be happy person. So then taking care oneself. So similarly, 7 billion human beings, everyone want a happy life. And then more than that, my future depends on them. So even for your own self-interest, you have to take seriously about the well-being of the rest of the humanity. Now, that is not unbiased, not oriented their attitude, but oriented being human being themselves. Clear? So that we can train through education, through awareness, not necessarily with belief, but without faith, without belief. Use common sense, common experience, and medical scientific research result, so that we can educate people. Good. Now one